So, what would you do if a phone call came in saying someone you love, someone close to you, something happened to them? And I asked that because some years ago I got a call from a security company that served my mother's house. And the call came in, and the woman was very nice. You know, the alarm went off at your mother's house, and you might want to go by and check. And it's like, okay, but I'm busy right now. I'm and she understood my hesitancy. She didn't give me more details, which is weird, right? But finally, she put me on hold and then put on the paramedic. The paramedic said, look, there were some installers here. They were going to put in a new window. They went to the door, but there was no answer. So they went to the side, to the window they were going to replace, and they saw your mom. And I'm sorry, there was nothing we could do. And that takes us back to September 30, 1976. Actually, we haven't left yet. We're still there. 10 minutes after the bomb went off, a guy named Don Smith, a local politician who had an office near Muriel's office, called Robert Pfeil, Muriel's brother. Bob was in his garage pottering, but now everything was about to change. Smith said, hey, there's been an explosion in the parking lot across the street. It's your sister's car. Smith wasn't in a position to say much more than that, but it sounded bad. Something in his voice. Now, Robert Pfeil was built for moments like this. He was an Army officer, attended West Point, a commercial airline pilot. And his wife, Marianne, like him, was also ready for this moment. A former flight attendant, she knew how to act in an emergency. She trained. And so they did what they had to do. They sped to the crime scene. It was supposed to take 13 minutes. That's something, of course, that Bob knew. Marianne was on the radio punching through the stations, looking for news, looking for updates. Because there's no way a bomb could go off in downtown Anchorage and there to be zero news. There was news. And here's the deal. Bob didn't know much more beyond what Smith had told him, and that wasn't much, but it was bad news. They knew that. How could anyone survive that? I mean, car bombs were in the news those days. Dublin, 1974, Detroit, 1975, Phoenix, 1976. That last one was a guy named Don Bowles, a journalist. Dead. Bob knew. He just knew. And so did Marianne. They raced north, thinking of Muriel and her messy divorce from a man named Neil Mackay. Neil was kind of a big shot in town. Of course, they were also thinking of Scotty, Muriel's son with Neil Mackay. They knew he was with her. Tuesdays and Thursdays were the days she drove him to preschool. And it was Thursday. It wasn't a great leap for the two of them to suspect Neil Mackay for whatever happened to Muriel. They'd seen violence in the man. Bob remembered during the divorce when Mackay called him to his apartment, told him he'd pay his sister to stay with him. It was a bribe, a flat out bribe. Bob must have looked at Mackay like he was crazy because Mackay snapped. He cursed me, Bob recalled. Told me if I ever crossed him, he'd have me, and when he was through with me, I'd look like I'd been run over. And then there was that other time when Mackay slapped her. What kind of man is that? The first stop was at Bob's childhood home. On this day, his 77-year-old mother needed a touch of kindness. She'd hear about the bombing soon enough, and someone should be there. Marianne took that one on, while Bob continued to the crime scene. And as he drove, there was one thought on his mind. He kept thinking of not just the divorce, but of Muriel's will. She insisted that if anything happened to her, he should spend her estate down to the last nickel, keeping Scotty away from Neil Mackay. By the time Bob arrived at 4th Avenue, the crime scene was cordoned off. There were police cars here and there, an ambulance, a fire truck. He went to the travel agency office, learned Muriel was dead, his worst fears confirmed. He offered what comfort he could, but her employees looked lost, like they should somehow get back to work. But how? Next stop, across the street. He wanted to find the lead investigator. Bob told him that Neil Mackay and his sister had history. The cop nodded, had the feeling they'd be seeing a lot of each other. The two of them glanced over at the debris field as they spoke. Investigators in suits and ties hunched over the ground, stuffing bits of shrapnel into a plastic garbage bag. A guy with a shovel doing the same. The firefighters, on the other hand, wore long faces. Nothing we can do now looks on those very faces. The fire was out, smoldering just barely. Behind them, bomb experts were raising car hoods and not finding what they were looking for, which were bombs. They slowly nursed them shut. Then there was a guy with a camera leaning over the Volvo's twisted frame, snapping shot after shot. Evidence. Bob didn't break into tears until he reached the back stairs at his mother's house. Grandma's house, his girls called it. Yep, someone had called. Contact the Alaska State Troopers. And as they stood there, sharing tears, sharing sympathies, remembering, in fact, that on this very same day, their father, their mother's husband, had been killed many years previous, 22 years previous to be exact. And then a single phrase. How could Neil Mackay be so evil? How could Neil Mackay be so evil? But then, really, they were called to action today. They couldn't sit around and mourn. Not now, not yet. What about Scotty? What about Scotty? Bob and Marianne raced straight to his daycare provider. 6 minutes, it took 6 minutes. It's into a quiet neighborhood nestled among the trees. 150 feet from the duplex where Scotty lived with his mother was the daycare center. They briefly shared grief with Rena Bertram, Scotty's caretaker. It's a small group of kids she had, only 5 or 6, but then, well, they had to keep moving. The master plan was to stay at Muriel's duplex overnight. Yes, they had keys. Once Scotty settled in, Bob went to get their daughters, age 9 and 7. Meanwhile, Marianne started packing Scotty's things, clothing, toys, treasured objects, and then his cousins arrived. They doted on him. They were in on the bad news, understood that this child would need them in ways he could scarcely fathom. The next day, all business. The reward for information about his sister's murder published within weeks. $20,000 reward, soon jumping to 50. The newspaper notice announcing that Muriel's travel service was open for business. That too, done. But for all of this, only one crisis really mattered. His name, its name, was Neil File Mackay, aka Scotty. Age 3.5. Status just a kid. Prospects vulnerable. Situation not something a 3.5-year-old can understand. There was like this question that kept lingering. Where's mother? That conversation was left to Marianne. I told Scotty of his mother's death a day or two after, she said. I told him there was a car accident. We never told Scotty that we suspected his father. He asked where his mother was. We told him she was gone. He knew his mother was gone. He'd heard of the explosion and knew something of the car. We presented it to him as gently as we could. He asked when his mother coming back, and then he answered his own question. He said, "Mother is in heaven." By that point, the Files had reached what they thought was an unimpeachable decision. Keep Scotty. Keep him away from Neil S. Mackay. Make it legal. That meant a custody battle. Legal documents would be filed. Robert Pfeil's rationale flowed in simple, coherent phrases. This little boy needs a stable family with a mother and a father. Neil Mackay does not know how to function around children. I don't think he can cope with them. Scotty is a very active child. Over at 639 West 20th, where Neil's penthouse ruled the Anchorage skyline, a sense of panic had set in. McKay's telephone also rang a little after 2 o'clock. They too heard from a business associate, a guy named Frank Nosek. He had an office at Muriel's building. And it was McKay's legal secretary, Virginia Zawacki, who took the call. And let it be said, the message from Frank Nosek was more qualified. Something about a bombing, something about a car, something about a parking lot. Beyond that, he wasn't sure of much. And then suddenly it was, let me talk to Neil. Now, McKay came out of his office a little bit later with an update. Well, Zawaki recalled he was a little bit, I believe, flustered because Frank didn't know for sure that it was Muriel's car, that Muriel was in the car. And Neil was worried about Scotty. Was Scotty in the car? Sometime later, Nosek called again, confirmed that it was Muriel's car, that Muriel was in the car. So now they knew she was dead. But where was Scotty? It wasn't until another call from Nosek that they learned, quote, for sure, Scotty wasn't in the car, as Virginia Zawaki put it. Now, I may be wrong in this yet, and I'm not sure. It was a very confusing day. And the penthouse, things only got worse. They tried to find Scotty, got on the phone, thumbed through the white pages, thumbed through the yellow pages, looking, blind, calling whoever and whatever seemed vaguely promising. They were looking for Rena Bertram, except they did not know her, not by name. Curious, right? This father, so concerned about his son, didn't know anything about his life, and neither did Virginia. There was one hope. Call his preschool. Okay, they knew that one. Nope, not there. And there was a reason for this, of course. Muriel Pfeil had a steadfast obsession. Protect Scotty. Keep his father at bay. Keep his father in the dark. Keep Neil Mackay away from Scotty at all costs. So when was it, you might ask, that Neil Mackay finally learned of his son's whereabouts? Later in the day, after the cops called him in for an interview. One in which he was asked for and gave a detailed accounting of his minute-by-minute movements during that day. He was a suspect, after all. They even asked him to take a polygraph. I'll consider it, he said, which really meant no. Oh, by the way, the cops told him, Bob Pfeil has Scotty. What Neil Mackay did tell police was that he was in his office when he heard about the bomb. And before that, he'd gone to pick up a new pair of glasses. Did he walk? It was 22 minutes from his office by foot, so he drove. What time? During lunch hour. The cops dug deeper, asked where Mackay was between 12:30 and 2:30 p.m. If it was a remote control bomb, somebody had to hit the remote. And if Neil Mackay was out and about, Mackay said he left his office in the Mackay building around 20 to 1 and came back about an hour later. So you were back around 2 o'clock, he said, 20 to 2. The cops also talked to Virginia Zawaki, because she always seemed to know where Mackay was, even when he didn't. And, you got to double check these things. Maybe there's going to be a discrepancy. And she told the investigator that Mackay left for Lion Optical at 20 minutes to 2 and returned at 20 minutes to 3. That was an entire 1 hour difference. Awkward. Because if it was true, Mackay could have been in the neighborhood around the very same time Muriel's car was blown to pieces, and that was incriminating. But there came a sudden change of mind, a rethinking of the details. I quote from Zawaki's deposition. I had a conversation with Neil afterwards, she said, and he pointed out that I was a whole hour off. I was a whole hour off when the investigator, Clements, I believe was his name, talked to me. And after he'd left, I realized that I was a whole hour off. And I immediately placed a call to him, and I corrected my statement to him over the phone. I even volunteered to go down and give it in person. He said, that's okay. And so here's the question. Was Neil Mackay right? Or was Virginia Zawaki? Well, a call to Lion Optical could clear that up. Answer, Neil Mackay. for the win. Now, let's go back to Scotty. If you're in the least bit like me, you sort of wonder, why did they take him to Muriel's house, to the duplex? The risk is, of course, that they could re traumatize him. You know, where's mom? Oh, yeah, she's dead. Everywhere he goes, there's mom, there's mom, there's mom. But there is no mom. And so, yeah, it could freak you out. But remember, he's 3.5. And so he doesn't have as much of a fully formed emotional, intellectual ability. Now, likely that this, in fact, will traumatize him. He will remember it. Childhood memories sometimes get fossilized, but there's an alternate reality here. It was a familiar place, for one. He'd been living there with his mother, and it was close to his daycare. And here's the point: Bob and Marianne were trying to keep Scotty's life as normal, and I'm using air quotes here, as normal as possible. That meant he still stayed at the daycare, still went to the preschool, same preschool, 2 days a week, keep it routine, keep it routine. Scotty knows us, he's been around us, we see him routinely. That means he'll get to visit his grandmother, that means he has his cousins living here with him. That means, in other words, keeping his life, again, here's that word, as normal as possible. But we can take care of him, Robert Pfeil went on to say. We have a cabin down on the Kenai. We go there, we fly there, we go hiking, we go clamming, we go fishing. We can give him a good family life. We can give him all the things that he doesn't have now. A real, honest to goodness family. So, one of the things I need to address is this whole question of the polygraph. And I know I'm jumping around here, but this is important. Now, many of you, probably most of you, know that the polygraph is not exactly a reliable indicator of whether someone is telling the truth or not. It's measuring biological signals. Is the person nervous? Are they quaking? The assumption being, of course, that everybody knows that to lie is a bad thing. And if you're quaking inside, you must be lying. Now, it's an improvement over the old days when they would put someone in cold water and see if they sank, or make somebody pick out a piece of metal from boiling water. Is he injured? Oh, he's lying. Or, the Scarlet Letter, where people have these visions, they see these things and they know. So, okay, an improvement. But you really do not want to take a polygraph. If you're ever in that situation, McKay's answer was actually perfect. Not yet. I'll consider it. I'll consider it. Because you can be perfectly innocent and fail a polygraph. And worse yet, there are people, the spy agents, who practice on a polygraph, and they can lie straight faced while you cry and look not guilty. So And most importantly, of course, it's not me who's saying this, though, really. It's the court system of the United States. It says polygraph results are not admissible in a criminal or non-criminal trial. They're not admissible because of those reasons. You can fail and be innocent. You can not fail and be guilty. Did I say that right? And the flip side, because of course you got to be, they got to get you coming and going. You failed to take the polygraph, therefore you're probably guilty. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? So okay, do what Neil Mackay did. Whatever you think of him, don't take the stupid polygraph. Call for your attorney. And of course, Mackay knew that because he was an attorney. Okay, enough for this gratuitous advice. Let's move on. Let's move on. See you next time.